Hello everyone, welcome to our week 10 lab. This week we are going to be using a browser-based API to create a weather page to look up a forecast for a certain zip code and pull up the temperature, the weather conditions, and then a lovely icon that represents our weather. I've got a picture of what we're going to end up with here. I have already set up the HTML, the CSS, and some of the JavaScript for you. So a lot of this walkthrough is just going to be explaining what the pieces that are there are, and then some slight changes. Same caveat as always, it is summer now, so if you hear the AC kick on, just try to ignore it. I'm sorry if it's loud. So I'm going to download my files here. Okay, open that up. Perfect. And then I'm going to go down to my OneDrive here and important documents. That's where the class lives. Goodness sakes. Alright. So I'm going to create my folder. We're going to call it week 10 _ Baker. Do you have a week 10 Baker? What do I do? Oh, okay. Well, let's just go ahead and delete that. Week 10 Baker. There we go. And then we will grab all of our downloads and just hop those on over. Okay. So let's take a look at what we've got here. I'm going to open up all of them in Notepad. So here is my notepad. I'm going to go ahead and just, well, I usually do it on this side, so keep doing it on this side. There we go. Alrighty. Alright, so we've got our style here already all set up. I'm going to go ahead and so up in the pre area before the numbers, take a look at the HTML file, notice the name of the elements in their classes. So we've got this weather API example here. Got a couple of fonts pulled in. We've got our style.css. Down here we've got our script. And then we have a div with a class of container, div with a class of input that it contains an input type of text, class of input value, and then a placeholder of enter a zip code, a button with a class of button, and then this little piece right here is this an interesting piece. So Font Awesome, if you ever see something that's an I tag with a class of FA or FAS, that is for Font Awesome. Font Awesome, this CSS right here, is a really cool free resource for icons for y'all. Alright, so you can sign up for free. There are a bunch of free icons that you can search for. So like if you want Facebook, so it brings up these, and then the way that you call them is by making an I tag with the class of whatever. I think this one uses Font Awesome 5.15 and they're on Font Awesome 6, so it's slightly different for this first little part. And then this is your icon. So if we type in search up here, so since we're using an old one, it has an FA search. But if we were wanting to use a new one, we would use like magnifying glass. So it would be FA magnifying glass. Okay? So that's just something really cool to keep like in the back of your mind, because you don't have to download these and include them in like your image folder. You just have to make a call to you have to attach the style sheet and then put this, and it gives it to you. You just cut and paste it into your HTML wherever you want that icon. Cool. So back to our HTML. That's our input div. We have a div with an ID of display weather. That is a class of weather card. And then we have an H1 with an ID of temp and a P or paragraph tag with an ID of description. And then this right here is for our API. I just wanted to put it in here so that you all saw where I got it. If you use something like this that's an API in general, it is a good idea to give credit to, the lovely makers of our APIs, because they created a really cool thing, and you want to make sure that, you give them credit back. Okay, and then last thing down here, we have our closing script tag, then our body and HTML. So I'm actually going to open this page in Chrome so y'all can see what it currently looks like. Alright, so currently we have our zip code enter. So this is all this div right here, right? If we look at our inspector, we have our input, and then we have this display weather right here that has a that just has nothing in it. Now what you could do is you could add like a display none and toggle it off and on, or display flex instead, and that honestly looks a little bit cleaner, but for this lab I just mainly wanted you all to get the API changes, or how an API works in there. So just think about stuff like that when you're doing it. Section 1. Alright. And then so the way that it works when you first load it up is it is functioning sort of. Okay? So we're going to see this a little bit in there, but make sure that you have your inspector up when you are doing this lab. Okay? So let's hop back into it. I'm going to go ahead and close out my font awesome tags so we can just switch back and forth. Alright, so step 1, open your script.js file. Alrighty, got that open. Notice the variables are set up for you and how they tie into our HTML. So, we've got our HTML elements grabbed by our variables. So we have a variable called button that goes out and grabs something with the class of button. So if we look at our index here, we have a button with a class of button. Lots of buttons. It's going to lose meaning if I keep saying it. Input value goes out and grabs input value. Name value goes out and grabs something with an ID or a class of name. Temp, ID of temp. Desk goes out and grabs description. And then card goes out and display weather. So you can either name them like the same that you're pulling over, or you can do a more descriptive name. It both works. Okay? Alright. So, step 2. Open your index, or view your index.html file in browser. Okay? Open the inspector, enter your zip code, and hit the search button. Notice what shows up in the console. This will be the data that we use to fill in our display data function. Alright, so got my inspector here. I'm going to enter in the school zip code, which is 97603. I'm going to hit search, and then I'm going to look at the console. Oh, here, let me clear it out so that it's got nothing. Alright, so this is what it gives us in the console here. So, this is our API data. This is what it's pulling. So it is pulling a couple of arrays. They are object types or prototype objects, which you learned about in our chapter this week. One of the arrays is current, which gives us the current weather information. So we have cloud of 0, which it's either a 0 or 1. It's a binary, so it's a true or false kind of thing. We have condition, which has a nested array in it of code, icon, which we're going to keep a hold of, okay, and then text, which actually gives us what our condition is. And then we've got our temperatures here, wind in kilometers, and then miles per hour. Humidity, this is another is 1 or 0, so is it a day? Yes, it was 1. 0 is no, which would mean it would be a night, right? Okay. Sorry, this is feels like temperature. Last updated, so when it last grabbed the data. This is last updated in a different format. Precipitation in inches or millimeters. This is the pressure in inches, or I don't know what MB is. Something metric. Our actual temperatures in Celsius or Fahrenheit, our UV index, our visibility in kilometers and miles, our wind degree, our wind direction, and then our wind in miles per hour and kilometers per hour. The second array is location. That gives us information about that zip code. Okay? So we've got 2 arrays to work with, technically 3 if you count the nested. All right. Cool. Now, if you're watching this versus doing the lab, you're going to get an extra little, neat little bit of information. If I think about it, I will put it up there. But this site right here is how I signed up for the API. So this is a free, as long as you stick to a certain number of calls. I believe it's less than 1,000. You just enter your email, type in a password, agree to the terms and conditions. Let me go ahead and log in. And then you can kind of see what it looks like. So the first 30 days you get their pro plan or whatever, which you can pay for. And then after that you get free. That's just information's made by it. And then what we want is the documentation. And what we need is our API key. So whenever you're using an API, you're going to get a key. And that is, well, think of the API as locked content, and that is what's going to get you in to access it. Okay? So, this is all of the documentation about it. The documentation on here is not the super best for beginners, but it is at least helpful. But this is all of the stuff that it's either takes in terms of querying the URL or gives in terms of the response. So if you remember our lecture, when we're talking about API calls, you fetch, you do a get. That get gives you a response, and that response is either like a failure or gives you information. Okay? So here's an example of the response you would get from an alert. They've got ones for air quality, and then this is really cool. You can do more than one location. But what helps, or what this helps with, is knowing what you need for to be able to pass through, right? We're going to use a forecast. Let's see if it's got an example. No, it doesn't. That's okay, though. All right. So, you can sign up for this and get your own API key, and it will be you'll be able to do this. The reason that I have 0 calls is because we're not doing it live on a web server, but you'd be able to do this and put this on your web page if you wanted. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our lab here. So on number 3. So in your script.js, I'm in my script.js, within the display data function, okay, so that's going to be down here where this big empty space is, add a line that sets the inner text of the temperature div to the appropriate data from the API. So this is where we are going to use that data from our inspector, okay? So how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is we need to grab our temperature div. So we're gonna do we're gonna do temp dot inner text. We're not doing inner HTML because we don't need to adjust like the element itself. We just want the text set, right? Okay. And then we want it to be equal to the appropriate data from the API. So let's bring back up our inspector here. Go back to our console. And we want temperature. Okay, so it's going to be one of these two. And then we want, how do we write that, right? Well, we're going to do Fahrenheit because we're in America. So how do we write it? So how you write API calls is that you pass this. This is our data, right? We're passing that through our function. So that is going to be our first one, data. And then the name of our top level array, which is current. Okay. And then the name of the value that we actually want. So temp underscore F. Helps if I can spell. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do our back quotes here because I want to add the fact that it is degrees Fahrenheit, right? I gotta look up how to do the degree symbol because I don't remember. Degree symbol. I'm just gonna steal it from there. Control C, Control V, and then F. Now we have to, well, let me do one thing at a time. Let's close out that. Now this is our variable here, so we do have to do the $ brackets. Okay, so what we end up with our temp.innerText is equal to, from our API, which is the data, that's the thing that's being drawn through here, and then the current, and then tempf. Okay, so I'm going to save. Oh, I'm going to end my line. I'm going to save. And then let's see if we did it right. Okay. So I'm going to reload. 97603. All right. Let's see here. I grew up in Oklahoma. So let's see how it is in Oklahoma. A little bit warmer there. So in our console here, you can see the second location is Tulsa, Oklahoma. Just to prove. But now we've got that. So that works. Great. Awesome. Good job. That's going to bug me. I'm going to put a space here. I'm not going to count you off if you don't put a space there. It's fine. But it's going to bug me if I don't. All right. Make sure to add the degree F to the text. I literally could have just copied it there. Oops. All right. And then still within the display data function, add another line that sets the inner text of the description div to the appropriate date. To the appropriate data. And we're going to look in the condition nested array. So what we're going to do here is, that one was disk. It's this one right here. Okay. So that. And one thing that I do to check to make sure that things are spelled correctly and I don't have any like errors or anything is if I do something like this, I can highlight it and it will highlight it up here for me so I know I've spelled it correctly. It grabs everything that matches that string. So temp, right? And then the other thing I do is I keep track of like highlighting and colors. I apologize if you're colorblind, that makes it a little bit easier. But we can tell that we didn't end our, we didn't put our second quote or back quote there because it highlights all of this for me. It's like, hey, this is everything that's included. But when we do put it in, it is unhighlighted. So those are just little things that I do because I didn't know if you guys noticed, guys, gals, non-binary friends, but I have ADD, and so I have a really bad tendency to make little typos, and those can really mess you up in programming. But even if you were neurotypical, you're going to make those little typos. So just do whatever you can to set yourself up for success by doing things like, you know, checking to make sure they match, or copying and pasting, or using the autofill. So I know when you're first starting out, there's a lot of times this like want to type everything out by hand, because then if you're not, it's cheating. In programming, that's fine. That's fine. Just credit the people that you like use stuff for, cite your sources, use whatever resources are available for you to make sure that you are successful, okay? Alright, so we're doing the inner text and we're setting it to the same kind of thing. So in this one, I'm not going to worry about the back quotes because I don't have anything I want to add to it. But we do need to grab the information. So what is the information we need to grab? So we want our condition, right? So current condition, we don't want the code, we don't want the icon yet, but we want the text. So for that, we are going to do data.current.condition.text. Okay, we're going to save, and then we're going to reload. All right, so it's got the sunny there, right? Pretty cool. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is we want to create an image element with the source set to the appropriate. I'm going to read the whole thing and then we'll break it down, okay? So create an image element with the source set to the appropriate data from the API. Hint, you will need to add an HTTPS colon before the API data to get the full URL, and then append the image to the displayweather.div. Displayweather.div. There's no dot. Okay. So what we need to do then is the first thing we need to do, we've already got our card up here so that we can grab that. And then I want you all to refer back to, was it last week? Week before. Let me see. Yes, right here. Look at this, okay? So in week 8, we used a function and then an array to create an image programmatically or dynamically, right? So we're going to do the same thing here. So you can literally just copy and paste it if you want. I'll go ahead and type it out. Okay. So, but it is the exact same type of stuff. Okay, so let me shut that down there. So we want to do constant image equals document, is it create element? Yes, create element, image, yep, okay. And then we want to set our source for it, so image.src, and remember that is one of those attributes that is already built in. And so here's where we go back to our API. And if we look into new console, if we look into the current and then condition here, if you look at this, that is 100% part of a URL, right? So what we want to do, I'm going to do my back quote here, and then I'm going to do HTTPS : because remember our hint, we needed to make sure to add that, because if you don't have that, the URL is not going to work. And then $ bracket, and then we want data dot current dot condition dot icon. Okay, and our back quote here, we know we've ended it because it unhighlighted everything and our line. And then I mentioned the this because this is the div that we're going to append it to, which means add it to the end of it, right? So before or right after this paragraph tag, that's where it's going to append it. So the way that we do that is we do card dot append child and then image. I think I got the syntax correct. Yay! Yeah. Okay. Shows to Goya that having examples helps. Okay, so let's do one last check. 97601. And what mistake did we make? Unexpected end of input. Line 45. Alright, well, I've oopsied somewhere. So let's see here. Aha! Props to you if you found it before I found it. If you're yelling at your screen, you get extra imaginary bonus points. Alright, try that again. And there we go. So that is all that you have to do for the lab. There are a couple of things in here in addition to the weather API that I wanted to show you. So the first is, we're going to just kind of look at this. So the way that I got the console to write out everything is our first little block of text right here. Okay? So before this fetch syntax along with the arrow syntax came to be, this is how you used to have to request from an API. So you would create a variable that is a new HTTP request. You would have to open the request, You would have to set your protocol, which is either get or post. And then you would have to put in your API, your URL to call. And then you would have to send it. And then when it happened on load, you would have to parse that HTML or JSON, right? So the old way steps were make a new request, open the request using your URL, send it, and then when it loads, do the thing. But you would have to make sure if it returned JSON to parse it. This is the new way, and this is the way that's discussed in our book. It's the fetch way. And the syntax for that is fetch, and then we have then statements, right? So we have then response. So if there is a response, return it as response.json. If that works, then display data. And so the way that it's done in this is that this is a variable. You could also do it as a function if you wanted to. It's just easier. It's a little less heavy on the memory to do it as a variable. And then the last is our catch statement, right? So if there is an error, if it doesn't return anything, if there's gobbledygook, whatever, then it will pop up an alert that says wrong city name. So I'm going to just put in okay, there you go. Since I had the inspector up, it was trying to debug it. But if there's an error, then it's like, oh, hey, you didn't put in a city name or URL that we could make sense of. So we're going to not do that. The other thing I want you all to look at is our URL itself. So this is actually given in our documentation by the Weather API. I apologize for the fast scrolling. Yeah, so this is our base URL. So if we look at that versus over here, so base URL, HTTP. I did it as HTTPS because I hate doing things in HTTP because they are not secure. It works either way. So https://API weather API.com v1. And then for our current weather, you either get it returned as JSON or XML. So this is current.json. And then everything else is a parameter. And the only way that you can do these is if you fiddle with them a lot. Okay? So this starts our parameters here, the question mark. This is key, so this is our API key. That is required. Okay, it says required. Q is our query parameter, and this is the different things that it can take. So based on latitude and longitude, city name, zip code, UK postcode, Canada postcode. I have no idea what that is. A METAR, an IATA, 3-digit airport code, an IP lookup, an IP address, or bulk, which we looked down there when we looked at the weather thing, that you could send in more than one, right? And then we have all of these. So days required only for using the forecast API, we're not. Date required for history and future, we're not. And then these are all optional. I went ahead and put the air quality in there, AQI no, just because you don't need it pulling extra data if you don't have to, right? So that is how you build the URL. In all of your other ones, documentation should be there to help you build that URL. And then in quite a few of them, there should also be I believe it's the API Explorer. Yes. So I can put in my API key. Whoop. Copy. Oh, fine, you turkey. Okay, there we go. Protocol, HTTP. You can also do HTTPS. JSON. And then put in an example parameter for your queue. And it's going to show the response. And then the cool thing is you can actually just pull this whole code right here and copy and paste it into your URL. The response code is 200, which means it's a good one. Like 404 is request not found. 500 is a server error. You don't need to know those. You can look them up. And then this is the response headers. And then this is the response body. So that's what we were console logging, right? That's what this is right here. The response body. All right. I've also put in a nice little explainer about making API calls in JavaScript. So we are not going to get to go over jQuery in this term. I'm sorry about that. And same thing with Axios. But it gives you another really nice explainer for XML HTTP requests, which is the old ways, right? And then fetch requests. And then you can look over the other two, Axios and jQuery, Ajax. And they're just different syntax for them. Okay? So, yeah. This is our last lab. I wanted to say that I am, like, totally stoked with how well you all did this term. I think you have an excellent foundation if you want to go and get, like, a web development position somewhere. Feel free to reach out to me if you need help or questions, even after the class is over. You know, my email still works. Other than that, have a great rest of your term. If you're graduating, congratulations. Otherwise, hopefully I'll see you again in another class. Thanks so much. Bye.